Should we introduce ourselves? Go around. I'm Zenya.
Yeah, Kintsugi, guys, do you want to introduce yourself
Sure.
first?
Hey, I'm Joel. I work for Kintsugi Hope. Kintsugi Hope is a mental health charity, and this is my colleague.
Hi, I'm Clary. I work for Kintsugi Hope, and I also work for the NHS. I'm a cognitive behavioural therapist, and I've got 20 years of experience working in mental health.
Yeah, so in today's episode, we're going to be talking about perfectionism, which is a wonderful topic. Joel, you're an expert.
I wouldn't say that, but I've got some experience in perfectionism. I remember when I started working for Kintsugi, I was looking at perfectionism, and I went to my boss. I was like, "Oh, I don't have perfectionism. How can I relate to that?" And she was like, "Are you sure, Joel?" I was like, "Yeah, no, I don't have it. I'm not academic. I don't care about getting A stars. I never did care." She's like, "Do the test." I was like, "There's a test?" And she pulled up this list of questions, what I've got here for us. Does your need for getting it right ever interfere with your relationships? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you criticize others for not doing things right? E.g. driving, speaking, dress sense. Backseat drivers, anyone?
Depends who's on the car.
Depends on the car. Do you avoid situations that may be fun, but where you might look foolish?
Oh.
Yeah. Say like if my friends wanted to go like karaoke or something, I'd be like, yeah, I'll go, but I'm not singing. Like I know it's gonna
Sure.
be fun, but guys, I don't want the embarrassing videos to circulate.
Question number 4. Is there a critical voice in your head that compares your performances to that of others and finds you lacking?
Yeah.
Yes.
And it speaks with a microphone as well.
Oh, yeah. It's
Is
got
it?
like volume 10.
You know
You know
those
what I'm saying?
megaphone
Yeah.
things? Like,
Yeah.
Number 5. Are you more perfect in public places and sometimes a disaster at home? Yes,
Yeah.
I am. If you see my bedroom, yeah, I am.
Oh, let's not get into that.
There you go.
Let's get into that.
Like,
What's on the floor?
Everything.
Wow.
Everything.
for me, on my floor right now is an old KFC wrappers.
How long's it been there for?
Only like 2 nights, so it's not too bad.
Only like 2 months.
Only
Like,
2
come on.
nights. Do the people in your life know the real you?
Yeah, I feel really privileged because I think right now in my life they do. But
Yeah.
I think there's probably definite points in my life where they haven't.
Yeah, definitely in school. I don't think people in school knew who I was, definitely. Does your anxiety about mistakes keep you preoccupied and unable to relax or sleep?
I sleep fine, mate.
You sleep fine.
I literally stayed up till 3
I was
a.m.
going to
working
say,
last
you said
night.
earlier. Yeah, I think for me, I struggle to relax because I'm like, oh, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do that, got this, got this, got that. And then finally, do you keep your worries and thoughts to yourself?
I don't know what would make you a perfectionist, whether you overshare your thoughts because you're constantly thinking about them
Sure.
and overthinking and you're an external processor,
Yeah.
or whether you keep them all internal.
But yeah, so I was here 3 years ago and I was given this and I went, yep, yep, yep,
Oh, wait.
yep. Oh, wait,
going
maybe I do struggle somewhat to perfectionism. And I'd been so caught up in it. Perfection is just this academic thing. And when I realized it wasn't, I started to see it in my life. And when I started to see it in my life, I realized, oh, it's actually stopping me from doing stuff. And one of the main ways perfectionism stops me is through my creativity. So I'm super creative. I love creating. But I've come to the realization, whatever I create won't be perfect. So then my mindset is, what's the point of creating if it's not going to be perfect? So my perfectionism leads me to a demotivation in doing anything because what's the point of trying
Right.
if it's not going to reach this goal?
I'm very similar to what you were saying about being demotivated. I think when I was younger, perfectionism would drive me to like working until like 3 a.m. When you should be getting some healthy sleep. But now I think because I'm not in that environment, it's making me feel demotivated. If I'm going to kill myself over an essay, it's really not worth it. Like, I'd rather just sleep and procrastinate. But then obviously that's not good.
Sure.
So like, where's the balance? Do I drive myself crazy doing it or do I completely relax?
It is a balance. I know for me, other than the kind of speaking and presenting stuff, I work in music.
Yeah.
And wow, that is comparative and hard because there's certainly an element where I go, hey, I want to hone in and perfect my craft. Obviously, there is a realization that there will never be perfection, but you want to upskill yourself so that you get more jobs.
Yeah.
And so there's an element of, I do want to improve all the time, improve, but also recognizing that you're human and you've only got so much capacity.
I think actually maybe one of the first things is thinking, what are those thoughts in our head that are driving us in an unhelpful way? Is it those comparative thoughts? Is it, I've got to be perfect, or X, Y, Z will happen? Actually, do we even notice our own thinking? Do we notice the thoughts that are driving us to behave in a certain way?
Well, what you've kind of described there is cognitive behavioural therapy, right? And it's what you've worked in for 20 years. So you are an expert. And I guess you have a faith yourself. And when I did CBT a few months ago, I remember finding it really fascinating how biblically true it was. Taking every thought captive. Oh, I've heard that before. Applying the truth to the thoughts. Oh, where's that from? So I just wonder, how has a Christian perspective changed your attitude towards CBT?
I think that's a really good question. When I was a student studying psychology, I had my first episode of depression. And I was a Christian at the time, and I was like, how can I even be a Christian and be depressed? And I think really, ever since then, my life's been a bit of a journey of how do I measure up my faith and mental health? How do those two things even hold together? And as I've looked at therapies, and like you say, I practice in CBT, I think it's really interesting that actually the more effective a therapy is, in my opinion, the more biblical it is. Wow. And so I think CBT works because fundamentally it's fairly biblical. Like you say, it's about looking at our thoughts, and it's about not being driven by our emotions, but about recognising truth and about how we behave, actually clothing ourselves in righteousness then changes the way that we think, and that changes the way we feel. And there's other therapies too, which are being found to be really effective, things like ACT, which are values-based therapies. And again, the more effective therapies are, the more I think they speak to something that's deeper and truer. But we use a different language in the secular world and the CBT world. We don't use words like love and forgiveness and grace. But it doesn't mean that those concepts aren't there. We just hide them in a different sort of language.
Yeah, similar to what you were saying about going through CBT. I did CBT like 4 years ago, and back then I wasn't saved. But in hindsight, looking back, I think it speaks a lot to the root issues and like the root places of where those thoughts are coming from. And to speak on like a sin perspective, it's not the sin that's the issue, but it's where is that desire, where is that drive to sin, where is that coming from? In the same way that the thoughts that I have, the thoughts aren't the problem, but what's motivating the thoughts. And I thought that there was a cool little overlap between the two.
What kind of thoughts are you finding driving perfectionism?
Yeah, I think for young people with perfectionism is trying to reach that standard. Like, I'm trying to reach that level of success, or I'm trying to reach that level of Instagram followers, or I'm trying to reach that level of popularity, isn't it? Or even as a child, if you're a child and you grow up and you only ever are congratulated when you do something right, like you read a book or you get 12 out of 12 in your spelling test, when you're only congratulated in those types of scenarios, it can lead you then in your teenage years to be going, the only way I feel loved, the only way I feel accepted is if I reach this academic success. So as a young person, they can drive for perfectionism because what they're actually driving for is to be accepted and loved.
Wow, profound. I think the thing with perfectionism is you do just have to recognise that you're never content.
Yeah.
And even biblically, Paul talks about in the Philippians, I am to be content in all situations, which is challenging because it's hard to be. And especially with this inner voice saying, hey, we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this. And that's so interesting that you associate with love. I've never really heard that before. It's funny, I don't know why this has come to mind, but a few days ago I was having a conversation with someone, and I always compare myself to other people. As a musician, I always want to upskill myself, and when I don't have time for that, I'm like, who even am I? Like, question my identity, all that sort of thing. But I had quite a sobering moment a few days ago in an encounter with God, where I prayed like, God, why can't I do better? Why can't I do better? And I just heard him say, you 4 years ago were praying for you to be exactly where you are now.
Wow.
And I went, oh yeah, where I am now, I'm not content. But 4 years ago, I was praying for me to be exactly where I am now.
I think people watching this will probably work out, how do I not let myself compare to others?
And I think it's a lot easier said than done, because as much as I try to be like, I'm not going to compare myself to my friends, by nature of us being in the same environment, comparison's still going to take place.
One of the things I used to hate after exams, when you used to walk out of exam in school
And they're like,
and
"How did
everyone
you
would
do?"
compare answers,
Yeah.
like, what did you get on question B? And some person would be like, oh, I got 36.
And
And,
you're
the
like-
other person was like, I got 37. And I'm there like, I got a triangle. So I definitely failed.
Yeah.
One of my friends says that comparison's the thief of joy. And I just find that really helpful, because I think when you compare yourself, you can't win. Because if you compare yourself to someone and you're doing worse off, then you just feel bad about yourself. And if you compare yourself to someone else and you're doing better, then you just feel proud. It's like there's no winners.
And off camera, we were chatting about the links between OCD and perfectionism. And I've always wanted to know what's the difference between the two?
I think firstly, you've got to start by realising that OCD is actually a clinical diagnosis. Like we were talking about language, often we don't use the terms like that. We can be like, oh, you're so OCD, you're doing that, you're so... And OCD is actually, it's a clinical diagnosis that someone's going to give you. It's an illness that you've got. And if you've got it, you know, well, you might not know you've got it, that's another story, but you struggle with it. It's really tough. And that is really different from just being a little bit, what in popular culture is called OCD. A friend of mine says, we use the word starving, like I'm starving, to mean I'm really hungry. That is very different from actually being starving.
Yeah.
And so saying, I'm a little bit OCD is actually very different from having OCD.
Yeah.
So OCD is a clinically diagnosable illness where you're getting kind of what we call obsessive thoughts. So thoughts about something bad is going to happen, basically, to one extent or another. And then to manage those thoughts, because they're horrible and they make you feel so anxious and you really don't want that bad thing to happen, you do a thing. And that's the compulsion. And that could be anything from washing your hands to tapping the table 3 times or whatever it is. OCD is treatable, but you need to go see a therapist, you need to go get some specialist help, and you need to go get it treated. Perfectionism is different, because perfectionism is a trait. It's like, it's something that, most of us do to some extent or another. Most of us do this comparison thing or have these expectations on us. So we all have it to some degree or another. And really with perfectionism, what you're asking is it getting in the way of my life? Is it stopping me from achieving things and doing what I want to do because my expectations or my comparisons are holding me back? Yeah, so I say perfectionism is a trait. It might be something we do to some extent, but OCD is an actual diagnosable illness.
No, it's interesting because often it makes sense on paper, like your descriptions make entire sense. But often it can be quite hard to distinguish, so am I this? Am I that? And it just highlights the importance to find help and go to a therapist of some sort. I know for me, I've definitely got a compulsion, which is to bite my fingernails. And it's often when I zone out into overthinking and I'm going, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, I should be practicing music, doing this. And I just sit there for hours and think. And I can't get out of the zone. I'm stuck for literally like hours on end. And you get out of it and you're almost like, whoa, where am I right now? And it's hard to navigate because for me, I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I've tried CBT and it was interesting and helpful in some ways, but it didn't quite solve it, and I'm still struggling with it, and it's hard to distinguish. Okay, does that mean I'm OCD? Because I technically tick these boxes? Maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, does that mean I'm just a perfectionist and have anxiety because I'm overthinking? That's the other thing I think. There's so many loose labels in the world.
Yeah, completely.
You just touched on it briefly, but talking about, I'm starving.
Yeah.
It's like people throw comments like that all the time, and finding authenticity in what people say is difficult in itself, and especially when trying to figure out what's going on inside.
Yeah. So we often don't talk about these things at a deep level. We will just throw these things out, say, I feel a bit depressed, or I feel anxious, or I feel starving. And that's okay, because it's really good to talk and it's really good to be open. But it's also really valuable to actually have genuine conversations, which are like, when you say you're a bit anxious, what exactly does that look like? And what exactly does that mean? And have a space to think about these things and have a context where you feel safe and you've got people that you trust around you, so you can have these conversations. Because they're not going to be answered by a quick Google search. Actually, often you do need to have a genuine conversation with someone who knows a bit about it.
You've touched on it briefly, but I guess just for people watching, we want to know, me included, how do we do it well? And I'm sure there's not one right answer, but have you got any tips, any advice that we can walk away with?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, you know, advice isn't like a one thing fits all. And genuinely, if someone's feeling like, oh my goodness me, this is something I'm really struggling with, then always go check it out with a professional, have a really honest conversation about it, because you might need specific advice, and that's fine. But one thing I find really helpful to do is just to remember that thoughts are thoughts. They're not necessarily true. They might be true, but they're not necessarily true. We're all capable of thinking things that aren't true. So if I, for example, said to you, oh, the sky above me right now is green, you know I'm telling a lie. I can think a lie very easily, and I guess you can think a lie. You can make a lie up.
I like your jumper. Sorry.
When we have catastrophic thoughts, or we have black and white thoughts, or we have those comparison thoughts, they feel true. They come at us and they hit us hard. And we can't detach the meaning of them and the feeling of them from the fact that all it is some words that have gone through our brain. So one thing we can do is distance ourselves from our thoughts. So here's a little trial example for you. I want you to think of a sentence that is one of those thoughts for yourself that kind of hits you a little bit hard. Like just one of those, oh, well, compared to so-and-so, I'm not good enough. Or I should have done this and I didn't do it well enough. Have you got a little thought like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, you all thought of something? Okay, now what I want you to do is close your eyes and think to yourself that thought. And then I want you to think, I am thinking the thought that whatever is happening. And now thinking, I'm noticing that I'm thinking the thought that. And say it again. And now I want you to imagine it emblazoned on the front of someone's T-shirt in like big blue letters. Your thought on someone's T-shirt as they're walking towards you. And now imagine it, front page news, headlines of a newspaper, big black bold. Got it? Imagine it skywriting across the clouds. Imagine it on the side of a hot air balloon, big fluffy pink letters. Now imagine it in Mickey Mouse's voice. Now imagine it in Darth Vader's voice. Now I want you to sing that thought to yourself to the tune of Happy Birthday. Great, now open your eyes. What happened to that thought as you went through those visualizations?
I was getting lost in the song.
Yeah.
Like no, but at the end, this kind of just become trivial. Like something that had a lot of weight. At the end, now it's become Happy Birthday. Like it has no effect on me at this point.
Absolutely, they become trivial because actually all it is those words are a story that your brain is telling you. They're just words. They don't have to mean anything. They don't have to carry an emotional weight. And our brains like familiar stories. They get caught up in familiar stories and they tell themselves the same story again and again. But when you can notice it and you can say to yourself, oh, look, there's that story. There's that story that I'm not as good as so-and-so. Thanks, brain, for telling me that story. You can just dismiss it and move on with your way, and it doesn't have to hit you really hard.
Thank you so much, Chloe. I really found that helpful. And thank you to the Way guys for having us on. Loved this conversation. And we'll see you next week for more.